Hello everyone, my name is Otavio and this is the Galilean Library. And first order of business, sorry, it's been so long, I thought I would have a bulk of time. It was spring break for me and I was free from work and from school, so it was fun, though a few friends came to visit New York, so most of my free time was dedicated to them, and all the rest was just dedicated on me writing my thesis and the remaining of that to reading. So I didn't have any time to film any of the videos I wanted. Sorry about that. Also, as you've probably seen in the title of this video, this is a discussion about how I rate books. And stay tuned because I'm gonna have a somewhat interesting announcement at the end. So yeah, great. So in the past, I've always felt like I was rating books a little bit arbitrarily, like just the way I was feeling about a book at the end while when I finished it. And although that's very important, reviews are definitely subjective, I feel like we also need to have a little bit of objectiveness when reviewing. So the mix of both characteristics are very important, I think. So in order to make my reviews a bit more fair, I've decided to create a system. And the system is, I'll analyze 5 different aspects of a book and I'll give a score to each one. I'll analyze them sometimes based on what I feel about them, based on what I've noticed in the book, and each time these scores will vary wildly. Sometimes I'll give a really high score to some parts of the book and another time a really low score. I think that's important because, for example, let's say I just finished 2 books. One was really great in story, but very light in the writing. So the story was fantastic, but the writing were so simple and bare bones that I had a hard time imagining that world. Or imagine another book, for example, that the writing was phenomenal. I had no trouble at all imagining things and everything was picturesque, beautiful, but the story was bland and the plot very weakly developed. So those are 2 books that have their strengths and their weaknesses. And sometimes I would have given the one with the better story maybe a better score because I was feeling a little bit more interested in the story at the end. While the other one I wouldn't give such a high score because the story didn't really interest me. So I think it's fair to be more specific about my rating system in order to know why a book is a 4-star book as opposed to a 3-star or a 5-star. I think it's very important to know exactly what were the weaknesses in the book, and I think with a system like this it's easier to pinpoint that. So here's my system. So basically, as I said, I have 5 different parameters in which I will be reviewing the book. Each parameter will get a different score from 0 to 5, and the total score will be an average of those 5 separate scores. The first parameter for me is premise. Premise I think is important because it's what makes you pick up the book. So the premise for me is basically what the book is about in the synopsis in the back or inside the dust jacket. Just something that I know about the book before picking it up. What is it about, what people say it's about, and why am I picking it up? Why do I think it's interesting before going in? And I know that a lot of people try to go into books not knowing anything about them, and I think that's great, but for me that just doesn't work. I really need to know what is the premise of the story. Why do I need to read this book? Unless it's a classic or something that's been well established and everybody raves about and then I just have to read it, I really do need to know what the book is about. So for me, the level of interest I have in a story based on that premise, that's the rating I'll be giving. This is definitely one of my most subjective ratings in my rating system, and rightfully so. It's just like that first off feel, you know, the first impression you have before starting a book. The second parameter is plot and pace. I initially thought of those 2 things separately, but after trying to think about them a little bit more closely, I realized that they actually go together really well, so I can actually combine them in one parameter. So for me, in this category, I'll be analyzing a book on how well the plot is developed. Is it complicated, but is it well executed? And how much does the plot give away right away? You know, is it info dumping or is it progressive? And I think that ties really well with the pace. So, for example, does the book have too many breaks in the pace? Is it well paced? And for me, a book is not going to get a high score just because it's like fast-paced and you get through it really fast because it's like there's so much action. That's not what makes for a good pace. It's just like a good progression of the story that makes sense for that particular story. So for example, I read 2 books in February that I loved. One was City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett, and the other one was The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. Both books I gave close to 5 stars, I think, and they are great in their own rights. But City of Stars is a very, very fast-paced book with a plot that is good but not that well developed. It's not that well executed. But The Goblin Emperor is a much slower book, and the plot isn't that crazy, but it's also very deliberate. So it's slow but still interesting. So those 2 books also got really good scores in plot and pace because they were well paced for the stories that they were trying to accomplish. The third parameter is characters, and this for me is not just about a character being likable or me liking the character. It's more about the character being interesting and well developed. And I think character development goes in 2 different ways. Either you can have a very well placed and well executed explanation of a character throughout the story, and no info dumping, as I said before. I hate that. I like things to be subtle. Or you have a character that develops as the story goes along. And as the character develops, you get to know them better. So those are 2 very different ways of looking at this. And for example, I might hate a character, but if they're well developed and well imagined, I think this would warrant a high score. Also, believability is a great point in this. I hate, for example, villains that are just bad because. I think characters need to have well-established motivations, especially the villains. The fourth parameter I also initially separated in 2 different categories, but decided ultimately to be just one, and that is writing and storytelling. In storytelling, I'm analyzing how the author develops the world. If it's a different world than ours, I will be looking at world building. If it's our world, I will be looking at how well established that particular situation is. So for me, writing is something very hard to explain. I think it's different for each person what a person considers a good writer or a bad one, or good writing or bad writing. It has to do, for me at least, with how well the writing serves the story. How well does what's written in the page really is there because of the story and not just because. For example, whenever a writer does too much flowery writing, it gets a bit annoying for me. I think, for example, making too many comparisons about like how heartbeats sound like rain or thunder or whatever, you know, instead of just saying that a heart is beating, you know, that for me it gets a little annoying. I don't know if you get my meaning, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know how well to explain this. It's just like how well the writing serves the story, and I think that's the main thing on analyzing good writing in a novel. And the fifth and final parameter that I look into when rating my books is ending/satisfaction. And for me, this is something that's also very subjective, and as reviews are, as I said before, the ending for me has to be good and interesting. Sometimes an ending will be a little bit abrupt, and I don't really like that unless there is a reason behind why that's happening. Or sometimes the book is gonna end in a cliffhanger for the sake of a trilogy, and I don't really like that. I like books to be stories in and of themselves. So in a series, I really like when each book can be read separately and reviewed separately without thinking of the rest of the series. You know, there has to be a story arc for that story and a larger story arc for the series. And I really hate when basically a trilogy, for example, could have been just one book and was turned into 3. So for me, that's good. I think that the ending of a story has to be satisfactory. It has to serve that particular storyline of that book. And there's nothing wrong with having a larger storyline for the series, but there needs to be some form of conclusion at the end of a single book, I think. And that's another thing that's important to me. So basically, that's it. After I get all the 5 different parameters, I will average it and give a final score for the book. And on Goodreads, as many of you know, the rating system is just 5 stars, and through this system I will be getting decimal points. So for example, a lot of books I have been rating lately, I don't know, 3.2 for example. On Goodreads I'll be rounding those down to 3 for example. Anything on a 0.5 or below I'll be rounding down, and anything above 0.5 I'll be rounding up. So for example, a 3.5 will become a 3, and a 3.6 will become a 4. And now for the announcement, and this has to do with reviews as well. As many of you might know, the Nebula and Hugo Awards are coming up. The Nebula nominees have been announced, and the Hugo nominees will be announced in April. So I'll be participating in a live chat about the nominees for the Hugo Awards, and that's going to happen on Sunday, I think April the 11th, and a bunch of people will be joining us, and Nicole from Nicole's Adventures in SFF will be hosting the live show, so that's great. I'm really excited for that. And the other announcement, that's actually the announcement that I was referring to in the beginning of the book, is that I'll be doing a review series for the nominees. So any book that's been nominated for the Hugo Awards or the Nebula Awards for this year, I will be reviewing them and posting a review. I will not, however, be reviewing the ones that are part of a large series that I would need to be getting through in order to review that book. For example, there's one, I can't recall it right now, that is the 7th book in its series, and there's just no way that I'm going to read all the other 6 books before that to be able to fairly review the 7th. So for that one, unfortunately, I'll be skipping, but for the other ones, we can look forward to the reviews sometime soon. I'll create a playlist for that, and yeah, so that would be fun. The first review I'll be posting will be Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, and that was nominated for the Nebula Awards, and it is a contender for the Hugo Awards. I don't know if it will be nominated, we'll find out soon. So yeah, look forward to that review soon, and I hope you liked this video. I hope it was fun, I hope it was useful as well. And if you liked it, click the like button. If you want to see more, click subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao!